Hi, Tom from bknutrition.com, and today I want to talk about 5 forgotten or maybe unusual back exercises that you weren't aware of, or the exercises that you knew existed and haven't done in a while. And these will help you with your back training to grow a bigger back, a more developed back. One of the most incredible things you can see on someone who lifts is a very detailed back with all the muscles shapely and proportionate. Certainly on a female, it's very attractive. I think that looks very good, and certainly for men, they do want to have a back which looks as though they are strong, looks as though they lift. The problem is when people do back exercises or back training, they generally tend to do a couple of the same things. There's always some sort of deadlift in there perhaps, or some rows, a little bit of cable stuff, maybe some dumbbells here and there. Generally, it's not very well thought out. I have a gym, I have run it for 10 years or so. I've been in other gyms doing photo shoots and documentaries. I see the same thing happen again and again. People doing the same types of exercises for back, using too much weight, not thinking about what the exercise is going to do for their back, how to engage with it properly. It's all about the ego of lifting as much weight as possible. So this video is designed to give you 5 exercises that you can apply to your own back workout, as well as the compound exercises that you do for building mass, because we can't get away from the fact that some of the best exercises for back are the basic exercises. I'm not saying these are alternatives for that, although 1 or 2 may be something you might want to consider, but they do give you a different stimulus you can apply to your back training, and have a little think about how can I use those to make my back training more entertaining and more exciting. So back is one of the exercises, one of the body parts I love training. There's so much variety you can put into it. So I put together 5 exercises that you might want to think about incorporating. I've actually got a library of about 50 or 60 exercises I can do for back, and I do with clients, and I do on my programs. These are just 5 that I've picked out which I thought might benefit, you might not have seen before. So the first one is floating deadlifts, or this is what's called potentially partial deadlifts or no touch deadlifts. And it is an exercise that a lot of people do. However, the thing with deadlifts is that people generally like the feel of picking up the weight and then hearing the smash as it come down. There is a sort of an ego thing there, I think, with a lot of people who want to make as much noise in the gym as they possibly can by smashing a heavy weight down. But actually, if you're thinking about in terms of being a bodybuilder, there is something to be said about the eccentric and concentric movement. Now, what I mean by that is that a deadlift is all eccentric. It's all the explosive up movement that you lift the weight with, and then there's no control on the way down. Generally, you just tend to drop the weight, and this is missing out a vital part of what's called the negative aspect of the exercise. So the positive is where you lift, and the negative is when you return back to the starting position. Now with deadlifts, people say, oh, you can't do that because you're lifting so much weight. I beg to differ on that one. I've had a slight back injury for a little while, had a lower back injury for a little while, so I had to think of a different way to do deadlifts, because I do like doing deadlifts, but picking up from the floor was causing me very tight issues in my lower back. Now I deadlifted for years, normal deadlifts. I did that for years and years and years, no issues whatsoever. I suffered a C6, C7 disc bulge in around about 2000, I think it was 2012, something like that. It was a long while ago anyway, but anyway, that injury effectively put me out of bodybuilding competition for about 4 or 5 years, and ever since I've come back from that, because of the disc bulge and the complications it caused, whenever I deadlift from the floor, I always tend to find that I get some sort of lower back pain if I go to a certain weight. So I can only go to sort of 80% of what I used to lift to, and so I developed what's called a floating deadlift. And I know it's some exercise that's probably a load of people have done before my time, but I didn't really see it used a lot, so I sort of picked it up and started doing it again. Now the floating deadlift, and if you're listening to this on the podcast, not watching on the video, there will be a clip playing just here where the exercise will be displayed. So if you're listening on the podcast, I would recommend you come back and watch the video here to see the clip, or if you go to my YouTube channel, I will have a playlist which I'll be populating over the next couple of months, which will have the exercises I'm talking about in there. So you'll be able to search Tom Blackman floating deadlift and it will come up. So the floating deadlift is something that allows you to keep tension all the way through the exercise. Now, obviously, with this sort of exercise, you're not going to be able to lift the amount of weight that you would on a deadlift. So your ego is going to take a little bit of a bash in the first couple of times that you do it. However, Once you've done it for a couple of times, the new challenge will be the control of a heavy weight through that movement. Now, a floating deadlift, it looks like a Romanian deadlift, but actually there's a crucial difference, because once you pass the knees on a Romanian deadlift, you would lever slightly on the hips to keep the tension on the hamstrings. What we want to do is put more pressure onto the back. So what we do, we actually almost semi-squat the legs coming down past the knees. It's not a squat, we just lower the legs so the back keeps the tension. On a Romanian deadlift, you hinge slightly so the tension's still on the hamstrings. This way, we're lowering the bone, we're lowering the legs slightly to keep the tension on the back. So there is a distinct difference between it. So when you start doing them for the first time, just be wary that your form might resemble that of a Romanian deadlift. If you're feeling it more on your hamstrings, it should be on your back. So you need to bend your legs a little bit more. So study the video correctly, because I see a lot of people trying to do this exercise, and what they do, they get past the knees and all they do is squat the weight, which means they sit back onto the exercise, which causes actually more lower back pressure. Now, I've used this exercise with people who have bad backs and who have come to me wanting to develop their back muscles. And I had one client who was always having to wear a brace around his waist because he had a completely really weak back. And we did these exercises to a certain degree, obviously, so he could build up his back. And eventually he didn't need that brace to be walking around all the time, because it built up his core muscles, because he was able to then carry his weight properly, and he didn't need that weight belt when he was walking around all the way through the day. So that was a real recovery for him. I've used it with clients who are looking to actually just develop their overall deadlift strength, and this will develop your overall deadlift strength because you're using more power, more energy, and more muscle, because remember, you've got to control it through the negative coming down. You are going to get more development of your actual overall deadlift. So this will help develop your deadlift power as well. But I'm talking from a bodybuilding perspective here. I'm not a powerlifter. I don't coach powerlifting. So there's going to be different strength coaching techniques for powerlifting than there will be for bodybuilding. So if you're a powerlifter and watching this is not for you. This is for bodybuilders looking to build more muscle. So I've used the floating deadlift as part of my bodybuilding routine. I've also done it on a Smith machine to some extent as well, which is quite useful. So there are variations you can do. It's one of the ones I use quite regularly in my own training. I do it with clients, they can do it, and I do it sometimes with dumbbells as well, which is another different stimulus. So it's a very good exercise, one I'd recommend if you are a bodybuilder. It's not to replace deadlifts, but you can do it if you've got, say, a back injury or something like that. Obviously, consult your physio doctor before you do any sort of back exercise. If you have an injury, don't take my word for it. I'm not a qualified physio, I'm not a qualified doctor. I can't advise you on your health and fitness. So get that out of the way so I don't get sued. Okay, so the next one would be a floor row. Now, a floor row is something that I do from time to time. I certainly don't do it all the time. However, a floor row can really, really help develop the back, because when people are doing a normal standing barbell rows, what you generally tend to find is they'll start off the first couple of reps nice and good form and correct form, and as they go through the reps and they get weaker, their form will elevate up, so they'll almost be in a standing position at the end doing some sort of shrug type upright row movement rather than an actual bent over row. So a floor row actually forces you into the position for correct form, because you've got to lift from the floor each time and return it to the floor afterwards. So you have to actually hold a decent position on each rep. Now, a floor row is a dead stop movement, so you would row and then replace it on the floor afterwards, row, replace it on the floor afterwards. You wouldn't essentially rep them out like you would with a normal barbell row. That being said, don't be a gym idiot. Don't be smashing the weights down. I've seen people do this exercise where they row and then almost bench press the weight back down into the floor to create a slam. Don't do that. People just think you're an idiot, and they'll think you're a gym idiot, and you won't get any respect from anybody. They'll just see, oh, look what that idiot's doing. So don't do that. Control the weight coming down. It's always about control. It's always about maybe the negative as well. So you row and then you return it with tension to the floor. Okay, there's going to be a noise when you hit the floor, but it won't be a slam. It won't be a bang. You're controlling the weight's not controlling you. So a floor row is an excellent way of, you won't be able to lift maximum weight. You won't be able to lift as much as you can on a normal barbell row, but you will get an incredible feeling of engagement through your back. So it's one of the exercises I do incorporate. I swap this with normal barbell rows, and I do barbell rows, I do dead stop rows from the pins, and I do floor rows as well. And I also do dumbbells and stuff like that. So this is an exercise you can incorporate as a different style of exercise into your back routine. Reverse lat pull down. Now, this is definitely not a mass heavy weight exercise. The purpose of the reverse lat pull down is to give a different angle for the back. Now, when most people do a lat pull down, the way lat pull down machines are set up, the cable's in front of you, the stack goes up and over, and the cable come down in front of you. So when you're leaning back and doing the movement, you're essentially pulling the weight away from the stack, which gives you that sort of movement. You've got to hold it that way. With a reverse movement, because you're sitting with the other way around, so your back's to the stack now, when you're pulling down, the cable's in front of you, so you can actually pull inwards and get a nice contraction on the back, which you wouldn't have got from the facing movement. Now, I use this exercise as an alternative to lat pull downs. I also use it as a warm-up exercise, and sometimes I use it as a finisher exercise for when I'm completely tired. It does require excellent form, because if you start swinging too much, a few things might happen. A, you might hit your head on the stack if you lean back too far. B, you might hit your back on the leg restraint machine, the leg restraint thing if you're swinging too much. So you can't swing on this exercise. It's 100% control. The other thing about this exercise is because your knees are not under the knee restraint, your legs are out in front of you and they are free. It means that you have to control, because if you swing like a lot of people do on lat pull downs to get the extra weight, you'll actually end up pulling yourself up rather than the weight coming down. So one of the techniques, and I picked this exercise up from one of my old bodybuilding friends, Pro Harold Marulia. He taught me this exercise, so credit to him. He used to do it with his legs out in front. So you can imagine sat on the seat, legs out in front, elevated, and then pulling the weight down. That's control. That is control over the back and the core, making sure you're engaging the back properly. So it's not an ego boosting exercise. It will massively engage your back, because you've got to engage the muscles that you're trying to target there, and you're not pulling excess weight. So it's one of those exercises which you do as a mere finisher or a warm up. Excellent exercise. Sometimes I superset with rear and front facing. It's up to you, but don't use too much weight with it. It's not something that's going to really catapult your gains into the stratosphere. However, it will serve as a good warm-up for the back if you're going on to, say, doing rows or something else afterwards. So bench row. Bench rows is almost like you can get the T-bar rows machines where you pull off and do so that you sit straight in or face on the pad there, and you would lift that on. So it's almost like a T-bar row movement. A bench row is slightly different to that. A bench row is where you are on the bench at a 45-degree angle, and what you're trying to do is actually pull your back in and not come off the bench. Now, when I see a lot of people do this with, say, the lever T-bar row machine, which they've got their pad on, they'll pull themselves off the pad, which actually reduces the impact on the back. Those T-bar row machines, I'm not a fan of them, because they are really prone to being misused. Overweight is a real ego machine. If you do it right, it's very good, but a lot of people don't do it right. They just do it for ego and lifting, trying to hit as much weight as possible, use their biceps too much. With a bench row, the idea is when you're lying on the pad there, you're trying to contract the shoulders and then pull the back in, so that when you're pulling the contraction here, what you do is you lift the chest up ever so slightly to engage the back a little bit more. And if you do it right, you'll be able to feel every single muscle contract all the way down from the traps to the rhomboids into the lats. You'll be able to feel it. You won't be able to do massive weight on this, because you have to have control. If you're doing it with a dumbbell, you really won't be able to do massive weight, because there's that element of balance in the dumbbells as well. But it's something that will really allow you to engage the back properly. And I would say this is something I would do, say, as a third exercise in, when you're already maybe fatigued from doing your deadlifts or your rows or something. You want to get that little bit of extra contraction, force the back to work, not the biceps or the traps or whatever. Go on an angle, go on a 45 or 70-degree angle. Pull the dumbbells in, or the bar if you're going to do that. And this exercise also lends very well if you've got like one of those football bars. So I've got a football bar at the gym, or a Swiss bar. It's one of these rectangular bars with all the angles in. That lends very well to this. Now, just be careful when you're doing it with a bar, because if you're pulling the bar up and using a bench, it's highly likely you're going to hit the bar into the bench. So the idea is not to hit the bench with the bar, is to keep the contraction on the muscle. So I prefer to do this with dumbbells normally. It can be quite awkward getting onto the bench if you've got a decent amount of weight. Certainly if I've been doing like 30 kilo dumbbells, you've got to hold 30 kilos in your hand and then plant yourself on the bar. Potentially what I would do is have something set up so you can pull the dumbbells off and then drop them on the floor afterwards, or have a training partner hand them to you. But make sure you do the exercise right. Think about you contracting the muscle, you're trying to engage the back. It's not about an ego boost in the gym. The ego thing will come later when you're taking the top off on the beach and you've got a back that's all like a roadmap. That's the ego thing there, because you've done this exercise right. And the last exercise is rope row. Now the rope row you do on the cables. Now anything involving a rope in the gym is always overdone by people because they do too heavy. Now the actual setup of a rope doesn't really allow you to do a massively heavy exercise because the base of the rope, if you do too heavy, will dig into your hand and actually crush your hand that way. Now I've got a little bit of reactive arthritis in my hands. If I do rope too heavy and I push there, I get a little bit of tingling in my hands for a little while. And if you are doing this on a regular basis, what will happen is actually your grip will suffer and you won't be able to get the movement right. So if you're ever doing a rope exercise, be it tricep extension, overhead extension, rowing, lat pull down, that sort of stuff, you need to make sure that you're thinking, what am I using this rope for? Because the rope is not the best piece of kit to do a heavy lift. A bar is the best piece of kit to do a heavy lift, or 2 stirrup handles on an attachment. That's the best way to do a heavy lift. What the rope is useful for is because of its movement, and the movement allows you, when you're doing a rope row, and this should be on the video when it's coming up here, is when you're doing the video you're allowed to go close, and then when you come out you can actually pull out and then in at the back, so you can get that wide arc movement. When you're doing it with triceps, you can get that turning at the bottom, and there's so many other things you can do with a rope that you can't do with a bar. So whenever you're using a rope, it's not oh, let's do something different, let's do a rope for different and then try and do the same weight. It's not what a rope's for. The rope's about the free movement it creates so you can get the contraction. Now a rope row is something I would do, say, beginning of it again to sort of warm up, or at the end when I'm just trying to get that little bit of extra in. You want to be careful that when you're doing it, you're not pulling with your biceps too much. So the whole purpose of the rope row is to allow you to engage the retraction movement. The retraction movement when you're training back is incredibly important, because when people don't do back exercise properly, they do this, that's how they row. They're not retracting their shoulders and they're not engaging their lats properly or their back properly. Every single back exercise you do, which is some sort of rope, some sort of row or pull down, you must have a retraction first, so you engage in the back properly. And that's what 90% of people don't do, which is why they never develop a really, really crisp back. They're not retracting and then pulling. That's how you do a row or pull down. And a rope row will teach you how to do that, because you can do first stage pull and then second stage pull into the chest there, or pull into the abdomen there. That is what a rope row will help teach you. It will teach you how to engage the back properly. So you're not looking for massive overload, certainly not looking to stack out the weight, because that's a lot of weight coming through your hands trying to grip that rope. And obviously the base of the rope, depending on what you've got, is going to dig into the base of your hands, cause you an injury. The idea of the rope is to get that free movement so you can really, allow the back to move properly and the whole muscle to move properly, more naturally. So that's why rope row features here. Obviously there are so many rows you can do. There's so many options you can do with different cable handles and stuff like that. A rope I found does allow me to have that freedom of movement. So like I said at the beginning, these exercises are not like the best exercises for back. They're just things you might have forgotten or might not do yourself in your own training, which I've added to clients and my own training over the years and had decent results from them, good results. Certainly they're more entertaining than just doing the normal rope, normal rows or dumbbells or whatever. You know, there's something you can different to add to it to give your training a little bit of a boost. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you got something from it, some new ideas maybe. If you did, leave us a comment. It's always nice to see a comment and people have come back and say, yeah, I did that and it was awesome, or I did that and it was crap. Okay, let me know. So maybe I can help you assess your form or something. Sometimes the exercises aren't for you, but if you don't try them, you don't know that they won't be for you, and you might have skipped an exercise which potentially is going to be a major game changer for you. So I hope this video was helpful. Like, share, comment, whatever you want to do, and I'll see you on the next video. Thanks.